Matthew Vincent Raymond, 48, from Fredericton, has been charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder in the shooting deaths of 2 police officers and 2 civilians in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Atlantic Canada, on Friday, August the 10th, 2018. He was charged on Saturday, August the 11th, and is accused of killing 2 police officers, Constable Lawrence Robert Costello, 45, and Constable Sarah Burns, 43, and Fredericton residents Donald Robichaud, 42, and Bobby Wright, 32. According to the police, Raymond will remain in custody, and his next scheduled court appearance is set for August the 27th. On Saturday morning, the Horizon Health Network said the Dr. Everett Chalmers Regional Hospital in Fredericton had received 1 trauma patient and 4 fatalities after the shooting. On Friday, Horizon Health said in a tweet that the hospital was treating multiple victims of today's shooting. CBC News has asked Horizon Health Network for clarification about the number of injured people and whether any restrictions apply to go into the emergency room, but has not heard back. Ross White, Chief Superintendent of the New Brunswick Royal Canadian Mounted Police, said the Major Crimes Division assisted local police in the investigation on Friday. The Mounties will take over the homicide investigation. Meanwhile, police officers from other agencies across New Brunswick will be patrolling the city, meaning Fredericton, in the coming days and weeks to provide some relief to the force. According to the Canadian law, first-degree murder is one that is done willfully, it is planned, and there is no sign of a wavering or impaired mind, and it carries, if the perpetrator or whoever the court considers as the perpetrator is convicted, life imprisonment without eligibility for parole for 25 years, assuming, of course, that the perpetrator was at least 18 years old, that is legally an adult at the time of the murder. If the murderer was 16 or 17 years old at the time of the offense, he or she will be eligible for parole after serving 10 years. If the offender was only 14 or 15 years old at the time of the offense, he or she will be eligible for parole after serving between 5 and 7 years. But then it is technically possible, even in Canada, for prisoners to serve literally the rest of their lives behind bars if they are considered dangerous offenders, and especially if they have murdered multiple people. Basil Borutsky, who one day in September 2015 in a quiet rural town of Wilno in Ontario, inhabited by quite many Polish Canadians, killed, was it 4 women? I will have to check that. All of whom had been his former lovers. No, sorry, there were three women. And he was sentenced in December 2015, no, sorry, in December 2017 to life imprisonment without eligibility for parole for 70 years. At the time of the sentencing, he was 60 years old, and this, of course, means that he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. He murdered 36-year-old Anastasia Kuzik and 48-year-old Nathalie Warmerdam in the first-degree murder category, and Carol Carlton in the second-degree murder category. And all those three women died within about an hour of each other at their residences in Renfrew County on the morning of September the 22nd, 2015. Then since 2011, also Travis Baumgartner, Justin Burke, John Paul Ostamas, Douglas Garland, and Derek Saretsky have been sentenced to such severe life imprisonments that they probably will spend, well, I mean, at least some of them will probably spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Baumgartner will be ineligible for parole for 40 years, and then Burke, Ostamas, Garland, and Saretsky will be ineligible for parole for 75 years. Offences under the Canadian Criminal Code that carry a maximum penalty of life imprisonment with a parole ineligibility period of between 7 and 25 years include treason, piracy, mutiny, aircraft hijacking, endangering an aircraft's safety or an airport's safety, endangering a ship's safety or a fixed platform's safety, robbery, kidnapping, attempted murder, accessory after the fact to murder, conspiracy to commit murder, manslaughter causing death by street racing, impaired driving causing death by criminal negligence, killing an unborn child in the act of birth, and aggravated sexual assault. Under the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, trafficking, exporting, or production of Schedule 1 or 2 substances also carries a maximum penalty of life imprisonment with a parole ineligibility period of between 7 and 25 years. In 2013, a total of 4,800 offenders were serving life sentences in Canada, although only 2,880, or about 60% of them, were incarcerated, the remainder being on parole. The vast majority of these offenders, about 96%, were serving their sentences for murder. The life imprisonment inmates constituted 23% of the Canadian federal offender population. There is no guarantee, however, in Canada that parole will be granted to an offender, while in Finland, for example, in most cases it will, unless the offender is considered particularly dangerous to the society. In most cases, especially if the offender shows contrition and has behaved properly during his or her life imprisonment, usually he or she will be released within 12 to 14 years of the start of his or her sentence. If the Parole Board of Canada determines that an offender still poses a risk to society, that person may be detained in prison past the parole ineligibility period. Any person released on parole from a term of life or an indeterminate term must remain on parole by the Parole Board with conditions for the rest of their life. While life sentences are rare in non-murder cases, the courts of Canada may apply a dangerous offender designation in cases involving serious violent or sexual offenses. Such a designation results in an indeterminate sentence with no maximum limit, but a parole review occurs after 7 years and every 2 years after that. As of 2012, nearly 500 inmates in the Canadian prisons had a dangerous offender designation, and that constituted then about 3% of the federal Canadian offender population. In 2015, a total of 622 federal offenders had a dangerous offender designation. Of them, about 94% or 586 were incarcerated, representing 3.9% of the in-custody population, and 36 were in the community under supervision. And this supervision lasts for the remainder of the offender's life. Canada abolished capital punishment under all circumstances by an act of Parliament in 1976. The last executions, and those were done by hanging, had taken place, as far as I can remember, in 1962. Yes, in 1962. Arthur Lucas and Ronald Turpin were hanged in December 1962 at Toronto's Don Jail. And in 1998, Canada eliminated the death penalty even for military offenses, cowardice, desertion, unlawful surrender, and spying for the enemy. Arthur Lucas was originally from Georgia in southeastern United States. He had been convicted of murdering a police informant from Detroit, but the murder had occurred in Toronto. He was according to an anti-death penalty website, executed today, borderline retarded, with an IQ of only 70 or something like that. Ronald Turpin, at the time of his execution, was 29, while Arthur Lucas was, actually the age was not given there. Maybe 50 or something. Turpin had been convicted of the murder of Metropolitan Toronto police officer Frederick Nash, who had pulled Turpin over for a broken taillight while Turpin had been fleeing a robbery.